Yes, and she's, I can't thank her more, and I think by the end of this meeting today, you're going to all want to thank her too. She's just been fabulous. Here's our agenda for today. I'm very excited. Actually, some of these things I haven't seen myself. We're going to see some demos from some new companies that are building tools around OCSF that make life much easier for the SOC personnel and the data management teams. Next slide, please. Oh.
Give me the power.
There you go. So that's me, the clicker agnostic person here. I didn't know I had this in my head. And Rod, my partner here in crime, introduce yourself.
Hey there, I'm Rod Wallace. I'm from Amazon. Was one of the co-founders with Paul's team and my team on getting off OCSF 2.5 years ago.
Josh?
I'm Rajesh, again from Amazon. Been with OCSF since the very inception when it was an Excel sheet, and very glad to be here.
And thanks to Rajesh for posting 1.5 Monday.
Oh yeah,
just everybody knows 1.5 release. We're trying to do a quarterly cadence. We're moving, I think at that pace. It's a pretty good pace, except for Arno, wherever Arno here is in the room. Everybody needs to meet Arno. He's the new chair of the ITU SG17 Security Work Group. That's for the United Nations Security. Everybody, the way he says it, have you heard of X509? You know, that's Arno. So Arno is working on getting OCSF submitted as a standard through the ITU. They don't move at a quarterly pace, so he's trying to keep up.
It's a quarter.
Yes. But everybody needs to say hi to Arno, and if you're international here, for sure, the international community is very interested in OCSF. So with that, I'm going to just review for those of you that have seen this before. What's our core value propositions, and I think. Obviously, interoperability of data for security standpoint, even more than security, more and more, but that's been our focus. We'd certainly love for products and vendors to natively emit OCSF, and I can say that's starting to happen. But until that time, obviously mapping events to OCSF is super important. What got us started together on this whole project, not to review the history too much, was the Amazon Security Lake. Amazon, if you're not familiar with it, they needed a schema to be able to store data in a really efficient manner, and that's really how we got started working together. There's a Symantec Broadcom history behind that, but when we got together about 3-4 years ago, data lake use case was super important, and I think you'll find out it's getting more and more important every day. So data lakes are a big target. Now, I want to point out it's a framework. It's not just the schema. And something we learned the other day, Open LLMetry. It's a
agentic.
We were all of a sudden, Irakli from IBM pointed them out to us, and we went over there and their website. It's like, hey, wait a second, this is our framework. It's Apache 2, it's open source. This is our browser. They're building a schema based on the same framework for AI. It's new. I encourage you all to go look at it. I'm still getting familiar with it. And that kind of brings me to the last line item. I could not have an RSA 2025 talk without saying AI. And Mark and I later will talk more about this during our presentation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'll just give a little bit of history here as well. The momentum, and again, the momentum is evidenced by you all here. Paul is right. About 4 years ago, in Amazon, we have this process called working backwards, where we listen to customers and we distill down and synthesize what his customers want. And we heard overwhelmingly that customers wanted to start to have control and agency over their own security data. But one of the things that they also said was that amassing your data is one thing, but making sense of it is another. And they were appealing to us to see if we could do anything in the industry to try and get some sort of standardization around security information. And then somebody famously, one of our customers kind of said, like, why can't we even agree on what like field an IP address is, or what an IP address field even looks like? And so that was the genesis of it. And we were working with Splunk at the time, and we kind of came up with this crazy idea together that says, hey, why don't we like build a schema and open source it? And so that was the genesis of it. I remember the call that we were on, and we had a little naming competition, and we started talking to other security vendors, saying, and it wasn't just security vendors, it was some of our customers. One of the original founders was with us, was ex-Salesforce, and we said, like, are you kind of hearing the same thing from your customers that we are? And they agreed. So we founded, it's 18 of us. About 2.5 years ago, we founded OCSF and got it off to the races. 2023 was our first release. And there was a Black Hat event. Remember that it was fairly well attended, but not like this. And then as we've been continuing along, I remember that we would just check in the Slack group occasionally, like, how many people do we have on this thing? Is it actually taking off? And it would be 30, and then 50, and then 70, and last year it was 450. We looked at the participants. The participants ranged from education institutions, or people in the education field, governments, security product builders, and enterprises were all starting to use it, even some government organizations. Fast forward to now, we are more than 1,000 participants on the Slack, very close to 1,100, more than 200 different organizations. Well, we can talk a bit about more of those. And just recently we joined the Linux Foundation, and Paul can speak a little bit more about that. So momentum is really growing. We're starting to see products and whole companies betting their products on OCSF. So thanks to you, thanks to the community. That's kind of the momentum over the last 2.5 years, folks.
Thanks, Rod. And yes, and I'm looking around the room and I see some familiar Zoom faces of people that contributed to the schema over the years. So thank you. You know who you are, and thank you very, very much. And love your continued support. As Rod mentioned, we were looking for, although we were operating quite well as just a true open source organization, with a free version of Slack and the open source version of GitHub, and we still are, but we knew that if we're to be taken seriously as being vendor neutral and have a long life, in other words, the ownership of the open source domains, etc., we needed a home. And so we thought hard about it. Jason Kierstead, who's here today, he used to be our steering committee member from the IBM side. He and we all kind of strategized, but we found a home with the Linux Foundation, who are really happy to have us, and that's the stamp of approval just unto itself. I'm going to talk to Mark a little bit when we do our fireside chat about his view of that, but it's been great. It's new, so stay tuned for more information about our position there within the Linux Foundation. But otherwise, nothing's changed. Go to ocsf.io for everything.
Yeah, just a little more on adoption. As I was mentioning, the logos you see up here are companies who are organizations who are very much bought into and are public about being bought into it. I can tell you that from data that we have, the number of organizations involved in using OCSF is not tens, it's not hundreds, it's thousands in reality. We know that from our own data. And so more and more you're going to start hearing companies betting their security kind of data and organization on OCSF or their products. And the analyst community has really jumped on board here as well, and is, I would say at first there was a healthy skepticism. These things have happened before and gone nowhere, but I think the analyst community has not only been helping reinforce what they hear from their customers and as part of their analyst work, about the direction that those customers want to go and influencing those of us who build products or who use these for our security. But as well, I think they've been sort of reinforcing the kind of architecture and the advantages of OCSF around a very well-formulated data set and the advantages of that. So what we'll start to see then, I think, is more companies going public about it. But we have many now starting to go public and talk about their use of it. So that was some of the skepticism, I think, or the bar that some of the analysts certainly were saying is let's wait and see to see if people start using it, and they're going public now. So yeah.
So yeah, let's quickly talk about the latest release that we have. Exponential growth phase, where each of our minor releases is quite jam-packed, and so is the case with 1.5 as well, the 5th minor version. So the points you see up there are just some of the few highlights that we have, and some of my favorite ones are the graph-based object that we recently introduced. Now, the quick view of what the problem was, right? If you imagine an EC2 instance and you want to map down the path to the IAM policy, how do you go there? The complex entity relationships were simply not existent in OCSF until now. And this is one of the biggest additions that we have, which you can use to represent resource relationships. Now, we also enhanced our threat intel object with a lot of formal mappings and schemas for campaigns and actors and other OSINT data. We also introduced 2 new classes, one for application security posture, products that emit those kind of findings, and the other was the result of actually a lot of community feedback. We ended up consolidating a bunch of discovery classes and created a streamlined live evidence info class, thanks to Jason over here, who is still here, sitting there from Tanium. Thank you, Jason, for that. And the other pieces, we also introduced a bunch of objects that's usual. We have formal mappings and schemas for anomalies and baseline incident detection findings. And we also ended up revamping our compliance object. Now it's much more robust, and you can easily map data from multiple compliance tools, trying to map multiple compliance standards as well. So I think the biggest takeaway for everyone, apart from these key points, is our versions are always community driven. We start with what is missing. Community people come to us, hey, we are doing this is a gap, so now let's fill it. And then we work on it together. So that's something that I want for you all to take away, so that if you're building a product, if you're using OCSF, come join the community, work with us, let's fill the gap, and let's make 1.6 or whichever the next version is. So with that same thought, what next, right? Like, what are we doing? So the obvious one is, yes, we are going to expand attribute dictionary, new objects, new classes, etc. But the bigger one for me is people have started to ask questions like what to do with OCSF, right? Yeah, okay, now I have a schema. How do I use it? That's where we are going to focus our next attention. So Zach here from Atlassian, he's going to lead the effort to create a how to OCSF reference architecture. Of course, a lot of people will work with him, but he's the go-to guy. You can blame him. But yeah, that reference architecture will basically walk you through, like, this is the source data. How do I normalize it? Okay, now we normalize it. How do I store it most efficiently? Now we store it. How do I actually use it? This whole pipeline is what people are looking for, and that's what we are going to try and standardize. And of course, the last one, more community mappings. That's always going to be increasing, and I strongly recommend people here who are working with OCSF to submit more and more mappings. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajas. And that ends our kind of initial section. I'm going to invite Mark Ayer over from 451 Research, S&P Global. And Mark's got some super interesting information to show us all. And then he and I will have a little